Like Captain Ahab and his quest against the white whale, there is one game that I feel like I've been hunting since I was a boy. For years, I felt like I should be able to beat this game, but every time I think I've had a breakthrough, the game lands a jab to my face. But I did it. I finally beat this game after 2 decades of attempts. The hunt was long, and at times seemed hopeless. But this is the story of how it feels to finally overcome and vanquish my white whale. You may have thought that my white whale would have been a crazy difficult platformer, or a shooter. But the action RPG Secret of Mana has eluded me since I was a kid. I was first introduced to Secret of Mana at a friend's house growing up, where I was player 2. I could switch between the girl and the sprite, and I really felt like I was part of the adventure. This stuck with me even after I went home. This drove me to get the game for myself, but here I was player 1. I had to make the decisions instead of just supporting my friend with his, and it turns out that I'm a lousy adventurer because I was constantly lost. So this was one of the first games that drove me online searching for help. I discovered entire walkthroughs for the game that I could consult to get me back on the right track. This got me all the way to Flammy, the blue-eyed white dragon that can be summoned to carry the party anywhere on the globe. And this globe view would be my undoing. All of the walkthroughs at the time gave directions based on the launch point, with no landmarks, only destination names, like call Flammy and go to Matango. It's southeast from here. Or head directly northeast and you should see a smallish island, land there. These directions were lousy for a player like me. I would lose the launch point and then be unable to follow any more directions. I would explore the world for a bit, but in the end get hopelessly lost, and with no way to move forward, I would abandon the quest.
You have no idea where you're going, do you?
Well, I know it's near water.
I guess we're getting close then.
But I still loved playing the Mana games. Growing up, I played Sword of Mana on the Game Boy Advance, Dawn of Mana on the PlayStation 2, but one of my favorite games of all time is Legend of Mana for the PlayStation. I really care for the series, and I really wanted to beat Secret of Mana, but at this point, I just didn't have the chance to. In college, I started collecting games from my childhood, and I knew that I wanted Secret of Mana. I acquired the cartridge and really enjoyed my time with it. But my navigation problems with Flammy persisted, and I abandoned the quest again. This gnawed at me. I knew I could beat the game. I had beaten all of the other games in the series that I had played. This is where Secret of Mana became a white whale, and I knew I would keep making attempts until I finally beat it. To raise the stakes further, I found out about a sequel to Secret of Mana, released only in Japan, and I purchased a reproduction cart that had a translated English patch of the game and included it in my collection. But I wanted to beat Secret of Mana before playing the sequel. In 2018, Square released an enhanced port of Secret of Mana. While I wasn't interested in this new version, this did lead me to hook up my old Super Nintendo Classic System and try again. But I knew I needed help. I couldn't keep making the same mistakes. So this time I asked some of my brothers to play with me and help me beat the game. But they lost interest before we even got to Flammy, and I abandoned the quest again. Then in 2019, Square released Collection of Mana. This included 3 games: Final Fantasy Adventure, the first game in the series that I had actually missed growing up, Secret of Mana, and the sequel for the first time given an official release in the US with the name Trials of Mana. This made me want to play Trials of Mana even more, but I still had unfinished business with Secret of Mana first. In 2020, I started streaming video games, and I found that I really enjoyed the experience of playing through a game with a community. Chat would provide some insight on the progress of the game, and if I get lost, I can refer to chat instead of consulting a walkthrough. Then, in 2021, Square released an enhanced port of the best game in the series, Legend of Mana. At this point, I had decided I wanted to stream the entire Mana series, so I started by playing through Final Fantasy Adventure, and when I reached the end, I knew that the next game was my white whale, Secret of Mana. I was determined that this would finally be the time where I beat the game and rolled the credits. So, I identified my obstacles. First, I needed some motivation and accountability to play all the way until the end. Second, I needed a committed party that would stick with me to the finish. And third, I needed a way to finally navigate the world on Flammy. My plan was to stream the game and have chat hold me accountable. Any of you that have streamed games before will know that the audience is merciless when it comes to accountability. On my first stream, I would start the game and play until I had more party members, and then put out a call to friends and family to join me on my quest. And while I didn't really have a good way to navigate Flammy, I was starting this quest like an anime protagonist, with a half-baked plan and relying on the power of friendship.
My friends are my power.
My first stream went really well. I told chat my white whale story and they heartily agreed to force me to beat the game, and I put out a call for committed party members. They had to be local because there wasn't a way to play Secret of Mana online. Luckily, my buddy Jake answered, and since he had beaten the game before, hopefully he would double as a guide. We got into a rhythm. Things were definitely looking up. Jake and I were reminiscing about the past, talking with chat, and just breezing through the first part of the game. We settled into our roles. Jake controlled Randy and primarily used the sword, and I played as the girl and the sprite, handling the magic through the playthrough, and it was smooth sailing for the first 15 hours. Before I knew it, we had reached the part that I had feared.
Okay. Directions. Wait.
We summoned Flammy and took to the skies. I gazed over the world map at the pixelated landmasses, afraid, not knowing where to go and worried about getting lost. Sure enough, after our first flight, we were hopelessly lost.
This is why.
Yeah,
This
we have
is
no idea what we're
exactly why I stopped playing at this point. Go southwest, he says. Okay. How
that it?
far? How far southwest? This is a globe. If you keep going southwest in one direction,
You will go
yeah, you
round.
just go all the way around. Pretty soon you're going northeast.
Luckily, the backup plan started working.
A little north. This is the only way we're gonna get through this game.
Yeah, is have people like guide us?
Using the expertise of chat, we were finally able to navigate the first flight.
Place from Trials.
Aha!
And it turns out that after the first flight, the game tells you about better maps.
Yeah, started the. Oh, that's helpful.
I don't think I've ever seen this.
Really?
Really?
This split the game wide open, and I was finally able to play parts of the game that I'd never played before.
One more step, and this will be the farthest from home he's ever been.
Exactly.
We were second-guessing ourselves the entire way, and this was always the reaction when we finally got back on track.
This is the castle of Taznica.
But the point was, we were making progress. I had finally broken through that barrier that always had me quit the quest before it was complete. I don't know if I can fully articulate what it was like to play brand new parts of a game that I was so familiar with. It would be kind of like playing DLC that came out years later after the initial game's release. I was so familiar with the systems of the game, but I finally had new lands, dungeons, and plot to play through. It made the game feel new, but familiar. It felt the same as it did when I was a kid as player 2. Jake and I were on a quest through uncharted lands, but this time we had the help of the village through chat, and we all went through this journey together. And since we had finally solved the problem of air navigation, we would not fail. The rest of the game went surprisingly quick. I thought that getting Flammy was about halfway through the game, but before we knew it, we were at the final boss fight. Even more surprising, we were able to figure it out and beat it on our first try.
Oh, that last hit for the crit.
Wow. Oh, and he totally mowed sevens to death.
Yep.
And before I knew it, the game was over. I was speechless and took some time to revel in this accomplishment. After the credits rolled, all I could say was,
A big thank you to everyone coming out
Yeah.
for my first start to finish playthrough of Secret of Mana.
the quest is finally complete. This one will always be special because I did it together with my friends. Jake was beside me with another controller, and many more were watching and supporting in chat. To everyone involved, I am very grateful. Thank you. Secret of Mana has been returned to the shelf, and there it will rest until the next generation of adventurers decide it's time to take up the quest and see if they can save the world side by side with their friends. and hopefully also with their dad.